Shame has a cruel trick. The moment you try to escape it, it uses your own efforts against you. Today on the Wired for Wellbeing podcast, we're going to talk about why. I'm producer Steve Lessard, and each week I'm joined by Dr. Jeffrey Rutstein as we explore how understanding your nervous system can transform the way you live, love, and relate. Hi, Jeffrey. How's it going today?
Oh, it's going great, Steve. I'm really well. How about yourself? Did you get any snow yet?
Yep, the snow's picking up here, and I'm going to cross my fingers that we're going to make it through this entire episode without a power failure. So wish me luck.
Good luck.
Well, Jeffrey, in today's episode, we have a written question from Jane, and I thought I'd read it, and then we can have a discussion about what's going on here.
Sounds perfect.
Okay, Jane's question. Now that I've been educated about the shame I carry extending from my childhood trauma, I understand so much more. I've learned a great deal from the Healing Trauma Program, from counseling, and from inner work about my nervous system. But even having this knowledge, I fall into a deep, despairing shame. A shame of my still existent shame that I now see controlling my state. This often happens after a counseling session or a program I've watched, a voice saying, "You can't do this. This isn't really going to help you." It's like an adversarial energy keeping me from moving forward. When this energy strikes, I feel helpless, hopeless, and defined by it. I can't seem to find the wherewithal to practice. Is there a way forward when I'm in this more paralyzed state besides just surviving the day? Now, Jeffrey, I noticed that so many of the questions we get here in this program and in the Healing Trauma Program are really at root about shame. And I'm blown away actually about how you define shame and how you help us see its fingerprints everywhere. So I'd love to maybe start there just so we can get everybody with us about shame and how you view shame.
Okay, so most of our audience will have heard us talk a little bit about the three places we can source our nervous system energy from. High energy sympathetic, also called fight or flight or freeze, where we can engage in those defensive responses. We can also source our energy from very low energy defensive patterns that we call a shutdown and collapse. And this is more of that sleepy, spacey energy. And as you go down, it goes into some dark feelings, feeling blue, feeling despair, feeling shame. If you keep going down, you feel numbness, dissociation, and at the very bottom of that level, you can go towards feigning death, which is what reptiles do when they're cornered. So from that point of view, shame is a low energy state. And because of that, we'll feel consciously critical, judgmental, upset with ourselves, unhappy, feeling there's some fundamental flaw with us. But many of us are also experiencing shame that's hiding sort of with or behind aspects of another state. So often shame can be mixed with anxiety, with flight, or it can be mixed with anger, fight. And so I can get angry with myself for doing something that was stupid, or I'll get caught, or someone will see as imperfect or careless. And if I'm anxious, I'll be terrified, instead of angry, that I'll be discovered, that I'll be punished for this, that people will stop loving me. So evolutionarily, we think that shame was designed to keep us from violating taboos of our clan, our family, our tribe, so we don't get thrown out. Because a couple 100,000 years ago, if you got thrown out of your clan, you wouldn't survive. You couldn't survive solo in the forest or the wilderness or the desert without company, without people who can help you make it. So it's seen that shame is a protection against violating certain rules or norms that would get us excluded. What it happens now, though, is so many of us can feel shame over little things that have nothing to do with survival. They have to do with, I got my work product in late. Um, I forgot to say thank you to someone. I didn't ever answer that email. I never got my friend a birthday card for their birthday. Um, we start going into these spirals potentially, not around some survival issues right now, but just not being the perfect or acceptable version of us. So everybody has shame. Everybody has the capacity for shame. It's one of our many states. It's no better or worse than any other ones. But one aspect of shame that's interesting is we don't have any inborn defenses against shame. We can have defenses against anxiety, against anger, against sadness, but it's very, very hard for people to have a defense against shame. It is so strong in its forcing us into a collapse, into a turning towards the dark about us. We're all bad. We're all wrong. I'm just a mistake. There's nothing redeeming about me. But it can come up in internal criticisms. It can turn up in perfectionism. It can turn up in the drive and desire to never disappoint someone or let someone down, or to be the best friend you can be or the best parent you can be. And again, there's nothing wrong with striving, reaching for excellence in our life, but there's a way of doing it from care, from desire, and there's a way of doing it for fear that if I don't do this, I'll be found out. If I don't act like this, people will hate me. They will think I'm bad. They won't think I'm enough. So a lot of us can overfunction from our shame without even knowing that it's shame that's driving us. And if people have had adversity or trauma in their backgrounds, they're going to have more shame just because any kind of traumatic experience sensitizes our shame circuitry, even if it's impersonal, a non interpersonal trauma like a natural disaster. But for many people who have some deeper issues with shame, some of their trauma also involved actively being shamed, criticized, judged, told by a caretaker or a parent that you're not enough or that you're a problem or what did I ever do to deserve children like you? That in addition to trauma itself, that uh, shame sensitivity is also increased in any environment that focuses on criticism, judgment, negative attributes. There are families that are much more focused on what all the children are doing wrong versus what all the children are doing right. And that's an environment that absolutely nourishes shame. It makes someone feel that their shameworthy parts are much bigger than their acceptable, welcomed parts, so to speak.
So I hear this front line of shame that evolutionarily was there to keep us in the in group, maybe, and not exiled. And then all the ways, particularly in our modern culture, that maybe gets corrupted or misunderstood or taken advantage of or exasperated by the experiences we have in our life. And what I hear in Jane's question, and also what I've experienced in my life, is there's like another layer there. There's like a cycle that when you see the shame, um, it feels like it changes its approach a little bit. It feels like it digs its hooks into you a little bit more. Can you help us understand that cycle and what's happening there when you spot it and recognize it?
So let's take a half step back first. We can recognize shame by either attending to the physical qualities in our body. And if we're feeling shame, there sometimes can be a flushing in the face or cheeks, but there's usually a downcast experience. We turn our heads down, cast our eyes down. There's a collapse, a rounding of the shoulders, a falling forward of the spine. And we can tell by the feelings, those feelings of collapse, and also there's accompanied by other feelings of just not feeling good or feeling well, feeling bad, feeling off, a feeling, a kind of pain, emotional and physical pain. We can also pick up shame's operations by listening to our narrative. Oh, you can't. Oh, this won't work. Or that won't work for you. Or nice try. The things that are letting us know in our head that we're not doing good, or that we're not going to be able to do this like other people can, or that all of our efforts never amount to anything. We can hear the tone of that critical, negative voice in the quality of our inner narratives that are going on, the narrations in our thinking, or in our body, the state of our body. And so, um, Jane obviously has been doing a lot of work. She was in the healing trauma program. She's been engaged in counseling, and she's been engaging on her own and doing some practices, some somatic and awareness practices that help her learn how to regulate. I'm so grateful, by the way, that she brought this up, because this is absolutely a question I've heard many, many, many times from different folks. She's the first one to bring it up in this context, so I'm really grateful for Jane for that. But when we finally can begin to work with shame, we begin to learn how to identify it. Oh, there's shame. And part of the steps are the notice and name, and take a moment to get one or two toes in regulation. So feels like Jane does that, like a lot of people do. Now, that's a very successful movement with shame, to be able to see it for what it is. Oh, that's that state, that's shame, I see it. And then to be able to actually step away from it just a little bit, to actually regulate yourself instead of staying in the storm of shame. Those are huge, huge steps forward. And I'm pretty sure Jane can do those. Here's what happens. Shame doesn't like a vacuum. So the moment that we can rise up against our shame, the moment that we can expand and not be limited by our shame in maybe imagining or envisioning something we can do that we don't usually allow ourselves to do that, or to take a risk in a relationship that we're usually too afraid to take, to speak our truth, or to express our feelings or our longings, that once we take a step in that direction, almost always shame will then rise up in response to it. So it's almost like waves, right? So like we rise up, and shame is in that moment in a trough, and we're feeling a little bit more empowered and secure. And then we do that. And then a moment later, a day later, 30 seconds later, shame is in the ascendancy, and our capacity for seeing ourselves as worthy and deserving is now in the trough. We're further away from regulation, and we're more ensconced in dysregulation again. But now back to shame, but this time using our insight about shame, which we had to work for, against us. Oh, do you see that? You are such a mess. My goodness, you're working on shame, and look how much shame you still have left. It's always getting in the way. You are a mess. You are never going to get better. And with that, shame is like the perfect ninja, because it's somehow outmaneuvered us in that moment. And then we end up feeling like, oh, okay, I'm powerless. I thought I could see it, and now it's coming back and it's attacking me, and it's just drowning me out in shame. So it's a particular kind of suffering, and it's very easy to get upset with ourselves. But that's exactly what shame wants. Remember, shame wants you to shut down and stop moving forward. I believe Jane asks, like, she wants to move forward in life. She wants to be able to have agency. And yet when the shame comes along, it robs her of that. And that's another central observation that's very valid, Jane. Shame has the capacity to actually take away the part of us that could source some energy from sympathetic in a healthy way, to do something about our shame, to make the situation better, to use our voice, protect ourselves, take better care of ourselves. But what happens instead is that we access the fight or flight energy instead of helping ourselves to actually further batter ourselves. So we do something like take better care of ourselves for an evening, and then the next morning, shame is dive bombing in and overwhelming you with how much you got to do for the day, and you're already behind. And look, you did that practice last night, and you're not one molecule better today. So it's this is going to be an ebb and flow with shame, and it does not mean that you're failing by finding that your shame is working at making you ashamed of your shame. That's one of its classic moves that is very confusing to us. We lose sight of where our shame is. But uh, I can guarantee you that with time and practice and efforting when you can to return is what can transform this. And what I mean by returning is shame is counting on when it does the about face. You've identified shame, maybe you've named and noticed it, you've done a little regulation, you're calming down, you're getting a little more spacious, maybe for a moment, and then this next wave of shame comes in, makes you ashamed about that. If you can notice that, and instead of collapsing in that, but being able to name, oh, here comes shame again. And then I know this is hard. Seeing if you can come back to touching back in, hand on heart, face heart connection, and finding a way to gently allow yourself to land back in your body, back in contact with whatever surface is supporting you. That each time you do that, you begin to weaken shame's stranglehold. And it really does feel like for a lot of people, like it has a stranglehold on us. It's so intense and unrelenting. Because remember, it wants to make sure you stay down. That's the only and sole purpose of shame. Not to be happy, not to make you a better person, not to point out your mistakes so you can correct them. It's actually pointing out your mistakes because, from shame's point of view, they are non correctable. You have to live forever, eternally, with these horrible, unforgivable mistakes. So, shame is a message, shame is a state. And as we begin to see it as that versus the truth about us, that's where we can make a little wiggle room. And then trying to find a source of comfort again or regulation again, to begin as best we can to meet the waves of shame that come in upon shame, that come in upon shame.
Hearing you describe the cycles and the maybe inner dialogue that happens, what came up for me is like, well, that's just me. Like that's just the stuff I tell myself when I'm going through daily life. And it just occurred to me, like, what percentage do you think the inner critic's voice is shame? I mean, is the inner critic the voice of shame?
In a sense, yes. Yes. I mean, the inner critic it's always looking at the problem and always defining the problem as us. Like, you were wrong to get angry. You were wrong to be so expressive, right? But, from a nervous system view, we don't look at pathology. We don't look at something being wrong. We look at, like, okay, so if you got really angry during that meeting, part of you must have felt unsafe. It may not have been the best, most mature thing to do, but you usually don't get angry. And if you got angry, it, you're not crazy. There's a reason what triggered you, right? And when we help people understand um, their actions, their behaviors, their limitations from a nervous system perspective, it also helps undercut shame. Because shame is looking for any way that we're not perfect, that we don't live up to a cultural or familial ideal of how we should be in the world. And it's always pointing out where we fail. And, this, especially for trauma survivors, can become this vicious cycle where we're always focusing on how we have failed or anticipating how we're going to fail, or thinking that other people are watching us, waiting to see when we fail. It actually puts an incredible amount of pressure on us. And it also amplifies our shame because we keep seeing everywhere, whether it's true or not, we keep seeing judgment against us.
I think I'd like to tease apart now how we start to detach from this false veracity that we give our shame, or the voice that we hear that is just trying to amplify a thing. And even in Jane's question, she's like, I've done all of this, I've done all this, but, and that, to me now from what you've shared, that sounds like shame's voice coming back in. How do we start detaching from that false belief in what we're hearing ourselves say?
So, this is part of what's really challenging. Because whenever we're in a strong state, like a state of shame, there is a mental, emotional quality, and there's a physiological quality. So the mental, emotional quality is I'm being critical about myself. I'm thinking I'm no good or stupid or whatever it is. Simultaneously, I'm having this physiological response of the slumping, the holding my breath, the casting my eyes down, the contracting internally and wanting to disappear. But whenever we have a strong internal experience, whether it's shame or sadness or rage, then whatever thoughts we're having at the same time, we tend to believe that they must be true. Of course, I'm a piece of crap. Just look at how horrible I feel when I think about how bad I am. That's proof that I actually have to be that bad, and that looking at the truth is disgusting me. It's making me feel horrible. I know that's just telling me that what I'm thinking is true. And so there's such a strong entrancement. We become entranced in this dream of shame or nightmare of shame that we lose track of that it's just a state. And so um, this is why we many of us identify with our shame. Instead of seeing it as a state, we just see ourselves as shameful. That's just me. That's my voice. That's just the truth about ourselves. So part of it is really beginning to get a taste of, oh, it's a state. You can notice the state because it has these markers of emotional turmoil, narrative, judgment, criticism, shame, and this physiological, painful kind of shrinking, hiding, withdrawing a bit. All of it combined. And any state that we're in drives our story. So when we're in shame, the only story we can tell is about our badness, not about anyone else's badness, our badness, and not anything about our goodness or what we've done. That's not even able to be seen at that moment. The only thing that is accessible is our failings, our faults, our huge deficits. And because of that, our identity can feel a little threatened. Our sense of self can feel a little threatened if we're not always hovering around the shame drain. If we're not always just about to go down in the darkness of shame, part of us may feel less safe because our nervous system has learned that safety is maintained through shame. When I have shame, right, I don't ask for much. I don't feel worthy of asking. And I certainly don't feel like attacking someone else. I'm too busy attacking me. So I'm not going to anger somebody else. I'm not going to burden somebody else with my needs. I'm going to kind of be self contained, trying to be as little of a problem as possible. And truthfully, then my parents will have less of an issue with me because I'll be less of a pain in the butt. But when we adopt that as our whole life, it means that we're actually spending more time hiding, believing in our shameworthiness, than actually living our own life, waiting for a day when we can be good enough or given permission to enjoy our life.
So let's look to the future a bit, and like,
Yeah.
maybe you can help us get a sense of what it looks like as we wake up from shame? What does that person do or think or believe on their way from where they are now to the journey of maybe waking up from shame?
So before we wake up to shame at all, we don't even know we have shame. A lot of us don't. I didn't. I had no idea that it was actually a central and defining characteristic of my life. But I just kind of overlooked it because it just felt so normal, right? Um, and some of my shame beliefs felt um, integral. Like I didn't want too much attention. I didn't want to take something away from somebody else. I didn't want to be the person that was taking all the oxygen out of a room and not leaving space or breath for other people to emerge or to express where they are. Um, so before we recognize shame, we may have very little idea of where it's in our life, where it is in our life. So the first stage is beginning just to notice how often we have these feelings of not feeling quite enough or being kind of anxious because we're worried about finishing or doing something that's not good enough, perfect enough, completed in time, thoughtful, comprehensive, you name the quality, just some feeling that it's lacking, that your work product is lacking, that you're lacking, that the dinner you're making is lacking, that something is off. Um, And as we begin to do that, that begins the start of us identifying shame as a state. That's the beginning. Now, this part is also marked for a while by once we become aware of shame, shame coming in right on the heels of that and blasting us. Oh, great. You noticed shame for once. Big, big job. Only 100 billion more times, and you'll have this pretty well, taken care of maybe 10 to 15 years after you're in the ground. Like shame will not miss an opportunity to descend in, take what you just did and turn it upside down. And shame is not wrong. Shame is not evil. Shame is not trying to harm you. Shame is actually trying to get you to give up moving forward. So, this circling and seeing shame and then getting re submerged in shame is very common. It's not a failure. It's the tricky part, right? Because shame doesn't want you to see shame. It wants you to be under the influence of shame. If I'm seeing my shame, I'm a little bit not under its influence because I have a little space to see what's going on. But if I'm just hijacked in the center of this shame storm, I'm only believing that I'm shameworthy. I don't see or have any other context or reality except my shameworthiness. Nothing beyond my badness, my incapacity, my incompetence. So it's doing the hard work of even turning towards those moments with a sense of kind friendliness or compassion. Oh, wow, there I go again with shame. Their shame is telling me that, I'm not making any progress, except I made progress because I saw shame. And this is shame just trying to, you know, make me go back in the cave, shame me about this, and it's not enough, and wants me to just give up and go home and go to bed. That's what shame wants. And if I can begin to see that and just call it, name and notice, okay, that's what shame does to me. And I don't have to criticize myself right now. This is my healing. This is my work. But even that self talk, like I'm modeling, has to come from a regulated state. If I'm dysregulated inside, my words are not going to carry any tone or capacity for soothing my own nervous system. But if I'm a bit more regulated, my voice carries that frequency that my body will hear and respond to. So it's a sharpening or a growing of this skill to meet what arises with friendliness rather than with the automatic tendency to criticize, push it away, or make ourselves wrong for feeling it or thinking it. And instead of doing those old habits, to begin to grow new habits of meeting something from the place of humanity and shared humanity. Being able to give ourselves permission to have needs or worries or fears and not make us wrong for experience. And how we work with shame ultimately is how we also heal from trauma, which is that most trauma survivors have the greatest difficulty offering themselves kindness and self-compassion. And the ability to do that is absolutely key to helping shame be transformed into compassion, into a deep compassion for yourself and for others, especially when you see how prevalent shame is among the world, right? I mean, there are a few people who seemingly have no shame, but the vast majority of the population of the world has shame sensitivities, does stuff to not induce shame for themselves, tries to avoid shaming other people. And so it's about beginning to talk about this too, right? Like, people can talk about sometimes being an alcoholic or something, I'm a compulsive gambler, easier sometimes than how much shame they feel, right? Shame is like the sex and politics and money conversations of the 80s or 90s or 2000s, right? It's like, well, I can talk about sex and money, but I just don't want to talk about my shame right now.
Jeffrey, thank you for that map and the understanding of where we are. I think it's been a really powerful journey for me to question, is that my shame? Is that not my shame? And whether I know the answer to or not doesn't seem like it matters of where that shame came from, but it has been a powerful question that I've learned from you to ask of myself when this pops up. So I love that map that you offered. And I also want to thank Jane for this amazing and beautiful question. I think it allowed us an opportunity to talk about something here on the podcast that we've talked about a lot and you've brought up a lot in your teachings. And I think it congeals in a really nice way. So Jane, thank you so much for your willingness to send that question in. Jeffrey, I'm wondering if you can let us know where other people can send their question in.
If you have a question, we'd love you to share it with us. One way you can leave us a question is by calling our voicemail at 866-357-5156. Or if you're calling from an international number and can't reach that exchange, feel free to email an audio file to, and if you can't do the audio file, just type in a question and email it to hello@drjeffreyrutstein.com. And finally, if you'd like a free gift that goes into a bit more exploration of what we're talking about here and also offers some practices for each one of the defensive states, you can go to drjeffreyrutstein.com/links. That'll take you to another page and you'll see free gift. Just click on that. That'll take you to the video. Steve, thank you so much for being my partner in explorations and in today's discussion of shame. It feels close to the heart and also something that so many people struggle with and struggle silently, alone.
Yeah, thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you. I appreciate being here. I enjoy being here. I'm always amazed at where our discussions go and really hope this is of benefit to people. So thank you.
Remember, this podcast is for informational purposes only. If you are struggling with any kind of health issue, mental health or physical health, please reach out to a qualified healthcare professional. Thank you all for being with us today. Until next time, bye for now.